Hooah, soldier! We are Oscar Mike to talk about COD. Intro, ready, go, go, go! Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, the show that's trying to prove you don't have to have big guns to know a thing or two about first-person shooters. First off, congratulations for clicking on this video. I recognize my target demographic isn't exactly the COD type after all. Trust me, my episode on Halo, awesome though it was, did not launch me into the top tier of gaming celebrity like I expected. It's weird though, isn't it, that such a huge number of people play these FPS games, and yet many of us making and watching game videos just ignore them, or otherwise outright hate them. The fast-talking Aussie and especially Bob Chipman, the game overthinker, come to mind right away. But they're not the only ones with a distaste for gunmetal gray. Last December, the International Council of the Red Cross held an informal meeting to discuss war games like Call of Duty, concerned that, despite all the accuracy these games put into their weapons and alphabet soup of army acronyms, they don't really pay attention to the rules of modern war. In other words, characters are able to perform the equivalent of war crimes in these games, but don't get punished for their actions. If you want an in-depth review of the conference, I recommend watching Seeing Red by old Bobby Chips, which presents a terrific discussion on the topic. In this video, though, we're tallying up the human rights violations committed in the entire Modern Warfare trilogy to see whether the Red Cross is right to condemn these games. To what extent are Price, Soap, Ghost, and Makarov ignoring international policy? And more importantly, do the games show them being realistically punished for their crimes? I guarantee the answer isn't what you expect. So when the Red Cross talks about the rules of war, what are they referring to? Well, real-world war is a lot like Risk, with rules dictating everything from how to declare war to how a country properly accepts its enemy's surrender. These laws have three major goals: to limit any unnecessary destruction, to keep wars as short as possible, and to protect people and property not directly involved in the war effort. The Red Cross is particularly interested in the last point. To put it simply, they serve as the ethics board for international conflict, upholding rules set forth by the Geneva Conventions, a series of 4 treaties drafted in 1949 in response to the atrocities committed in World War II by the Nazis. War crimes, then, are actions like genocide, genocide, serious breaches of these wartime regulations. Instead of just listing these rules out, let's learn through a few examples from the game, shall we? First, in this mission of Modern Warfare 1, you automatically fail if you attack the village church, an accurate representation of the Geneva Conventions since religious buildings, museums, and historical landmarks are all protected. Thumbs up, Activision. However, the rest of the civilian objects, like the houses, graveyard, and water tower, would also be protected because they're civilian property that is in no way aiding the war effort. Since blowing them up in the game is not penalized, this would make the Red Cross sad. Also, a few missions later, destroying mosques as a helicopter gunman bears no penalty, making the game's application of the Geneva Conventions inconsistent at best, and religiously intolerant at worst. Next, let's play a game I like to call Spot That War Crime! I'm going to play you a scene from Modern Warfare 3. See if you can spot all the war crimes committed.
Gas masks on. Look familiar.
No, no, please!
Where's Makarov? Tell me and it's yours.
Our contact was a man named Volk. We never met Makarov.
Where's this Volk?
Paris! He oversaw the delivery in Paris!
Right then. This is for the boys at Hereford.
Ready for the answers? First, The Geneva Conventions state that there is to be no torture of prisoners. However, in this moment, Price uses the threat of poison gas to get a confession out of the captured Warabi. So, strike one. The use of gas also disregards another document, the Geneva Protocol, which prohibits the use of chemical or biological weapons in warfare because they present overly painful, inhumane ways of death. Yes, even though the poison gas is technically the enemy's, Price should have been the bigger man and not used it. So that's number 2. The third and fourth breaches occur at the end of the interrogation. By killing him, Price breaks 2 major rules. First, soldiers are never allowed to wound an unarmed, surrendered man. Second, by killing him, Price takes justice into his own hands, preventing his victim from receiving a fair trial, and that is not okay. So that's 4 breaches of international humanitarian law in one scene lasting 20 seconds. Can you imagine how many are in the series as a whole? Well, get ready to find out, cause here comes Modern Warfare's greatest war crimes. So I think it's safe to say that in these games, the Geneva Conventions have been thrown right out the window. Whether it's Makarov destroying French phallic symbols or Price becoming a bringer of one-man vigilante justice, no one in this game walks away unscathed. However, the Red Cross's biggest concern was not so much with the actual committing of the crimes, so much as it was with having the characters get punished or reprimanded for breaching wartime protocol. In other words, getting tried for their war crimes. But here's the thing. By not showing any consequences for the American soldiers, the games do accurately portray the end result of their war crimes. Take a look at history. It's called victor's justice, a trend where the winning side of a war gets to judge what was right or wrong in the actions of both its own troops and those of its enemy. In other words, by winning the war, they get the ability to show themselves some favoritism. For example, during the Vietnam War, 26 US troops were tried for taking part in the My Lai massacre, where 400 to 500 unarmed South Vietnamese civilians, mostly women and children, were found tortured, sexually assaulted, maimed, and murdered. Think No Russian, but worse. Of the 26, 1 was convicted, originally being sentenced to life in prison. 2 days later, President Nixon reduced his sentence to 20 years. It was then reduced to 10. Eventually, he served house arrest for a couple months. More recently, you may recall the debates over waterboarding and other quote-unquote enhanced interrogation techniques that the US used post 9/11. Despite multiple human rights organizations qualifying these methods as torture, no one was ever tried for their actions. But that's not to say that it's just restricted to the US. Wherever there's war crime cases, there's evidence of victor's justice. Just look into the Yugoslav wars or the genocide in Rwanda as other recent examples. There have been moves to combat victor's justice, however. The International Criminal Court, or ICC, was founded in 2002 in The Hague, Netherlands, as a means of impartially trying cases of genocide, crimes against humanity, and other war crimes. Currently, 120 nations have agreed to abide by the rulings of the court. The United States is not one of them, which means that they don't have to abide by decisions made by the court. Critics of this decision say that it's to ensure that America can continue making its own rules of war, which brings us back to Call of Duty and the Red Cross. Since the US was on the winning side of Call of Duty's World War III, they would get to decide what constituted as war crimes. This means that things like simple property destruction or occupying a church would easily go unnoticed. The No Russian mission would quickly be written off the record. At most, Price could get court-martialed for his vigilante justice, appearing in a military court of his peers rather than an impartial international trial. It's like they always say,
History is written by the victor.
If the Red Cross really wants an accurate portrayal of the consequences of war crimes, there's an argument to be made that these games provide it. I guess that means that, yeah, Call of Duty may just have something to say about the state of war crime prosecution today. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Listen to me. Good God, y'all.